also can answer some questions at the end. And I think we just began recording. So this is the first training of the year, and we'll have a new training each month starting in January related to social emotional learning and parenting strategies. And so I hope to see you in the future trainings as well. Today, Shelby will be running the slides for me, and Sonia will be translating if we can get that up and running. And like I said earlier, this training is about an hour long. So I'm going to try to get through the bulk of it without putting us past our time. So go ahead with the next slide. You can actually skip ahead to the third slide, the next one. There we go. So first, I just want to kind of bring up the question, why are we talking about this, or why is it important? And I just want to point to the fact that mental health is just as important to a child's well-being as physical health. And this is true for adults as well. Sometimes it's difficult for adults to recognize that infants and young children are really emotional beings that are very attuned to their environment. And we all know children cry and that's what they do, but we can be so overwhelmed that we have so many responsibilities that we don't often take the time to really thoroughly recognize and understand why our infant or toddler might be upset, or we can't always take the time to stop what we're doing and use those moments as teachable moments. And so it can take a lot of extra patience and time and attention to use those moments to teach them coping skills or new ways to handle their big feelings, especially since they might not have the words to express their emotions until a certain age. Research has shown over the last couple decades that even infants have the ability to experience a full range of emotions from joy and fear to even hopelessness or grief. So although babies and young children will eventually calm down if they're upset, throughout their early development, it's really our responsibility to help them learn how to react to situations and respond to the world around them. So I hope this training will give some context about what kinds of things impact children's mental health and some ways that we can help their social and emotional well-being. I saw a hand raised. Does someone have a question? Laura? I know it disappeared. I'm not sure. If you have a question, you can stop me. Go ahead with the next slide, Shelby. So first, I would like to kind of define early childhood mental health. And this refers to the quality of your child's early social, emotional development and resiliency to stress. And healthy early social, emotional development exists within the cultural context of each family and community. So there are different norms in each culture, but overall, social emotional development generally involves these four core components, which are the capacity to recognize, regulate, and express emotions, the ability to build coping skills and resilience in response to stress, the ability to form close and secure interpersonal relationships, and the capacity to feel secure and confident enough to explore their environment and learn. Overall, stress occurs across cultural economic boundaries, and if stress continues to impact infants, toddlers, and young children, it can lead to negative impacts on their brain and their development of their emotional and mental well-being. And these things can have lasting effects as they age. If everyone could just mute their microphones, please. Yeah. Unless you have a question. Thank you. All right, next slide. So on this slide, these are just some of the main categories of social emotional development, along with some of the more concrete skills that they learn as they develop. We just talked about the four core components, but these are more specific skills that they develop over their early development. And so it starts with, or one of the skills is self-management, which means managing emotions and behaviors to achieve one's goals. This skill helps children manage their response to disappointment or helps them cope with delaying gratification, as in having to wait for something that they want. And we know that behavior is mostly motivated by either wanting to obtain something that we like or avoid something we don't like. So having this skill really helps kids learn how to monitor themselves in order to obtain what they want or avoid what they don't want. The ability to regulate and manage one's emotions is one of the most important factors for success in school, work, and relationships in the long term. And it's the reason that we don't like flip the table over if we're angry or punch a wall every time we get upset, for example. We have self-management skills as we get older to regulate our responses to stress. And the next skill is self-awareness. This means recognizing one's own emotions and values, as well as one's strengths and challenges. And so over time, children will learn how to identify how they're feeling, what's important to them, their strengths and their areas for growth or where they can improve. And self-awareness can really impact our self-esteem, our self-expression, self-advocacy, and overall just our overall mental health. Self-awareness also impacts if we are able to get our needs met, and it helps us understand the ways that we impact other people. The next skill is responsible decision-making. This means making ethical and constructive choices about personal and social behavior. This skill is what we're talking about when we encourage kids to make good choices. And using this skill means actively choosing to do the right thing, help others, be polite and considerate, not taking things that aren't ours, etc. And it's a skill that builds empathy and helps us relate to others' experiences, as well as plan ahead for ourselves. Positive verbal and physical experiences with others will then allow new brain connections to form, which really helps the brain grow and develop in many ways. And that leads into relationship skills. So being able to form positive relationships and work in teams and dealing effectively with conflict. That's another skill they learn this time. This is very important, especially in the school setting. There's a point in early development where they start to highly consider the needs and feelings of others and how others perceive them. And this is when children learn to problem solve and work with other people and cooperate. And again, healthy early relationships are vital to brain development because they wire the brain to learn to trust others, to love, and to feel safe and secure. And then one of the last skills is social awareness. So showing understanding and empathy for others. Like we mentioned, they'll grow to care about what other people are going through and how their actions affect other people. And this will help them meet their goal of fitting in when they reach that stage of social development. Go ahead with the next slide. But to understand social emotional development in early childhood, it really is helpful to understand attachment. That's kind of where it all starts. It's kind of the root of all of the social emotional development. It really sets up how we make our connections with others throughout our lives. And I will send a handout to those of you who provided your name in the chat that talks a little bit more about attachment. But to explain it here, attachment refers to the ongoing nurturing relationships that a child builds with adults. And the caregiver-child relationship has a direct, fundamental impact on brain development. And healthy relationships with caregivers that support attachment lead children to trust that the world is safe and allows them to feel confident in their ability to explore and learn. So it all starts at the root, and attachment styles are developed during the early formative years, usually from 0 to 2. If everyone could please just mute their microphones, unless you have a question.
Yes, shall be giving this.
Yeah, Victoria, do you have a question?
I saw that. Do we have any, do you know if there's any parents from our site that are attending?
But if I look by the name, I don't think so.
I didn't think so.
Victoria, do you have a question?
All of our parents work, so I don't know why. My first thought when I saw that, Shelby sent it.
Victoria,
is it so early?
Do you have a question?
It's difficult for families.
Maybe not for Part Day Pre-K families.
Yeah.
Shelby, can you ask Victoria to mute? I think you can do that as the host. Thank you. Okay, where am I? I'm looking at my notes. Okay, attachment styles are developed during the early formative years, so usually 0 to age 2. And there are 4 main attachment styles, which you can refer to your handout to learn a little bit more about. But just to give a little bit of context about the development, between 6 weeks old and 7 months old, newborns start to show attachment to primary and secondary caregivers. Usually this is mom and dad, or the two caregivers that are most often there. From 7 to 10 months old, infants begin to show a strong attachment to one particular caregiver, which is usually mom. And they begin to demonstrate some anxiety around strangers. And from 10 months on, infants start to form bonds to other caregivers, which includes usually dad or other siblings, grandparents, or other relatives. And while attachment styles displayed in adulthood are not necessarily the exact same as what we kind of experience in infancy, our early attachments really do have the potential to seriously impact our relationships later on in life. And kids who are securely attached in childhood tend to have good self-esteem, strong romantic relationships as adults, and the ability to self-disclose to others. And they also tend to develop or be a little bit more successful in school, have social relationships, and experience less depression and anxiety overall. Okay, I'm just checking the chat just to see. Okay. And there are many factors that play a role in the way that a child forms their attachment, some of which includes the child's temperament or personality. But it has a lot to do as well with the environment that they're in. But it's important to understand that regardless of attachment style, children will learn to trust others and build relationships over time. It just helps to understand that attachment starts from birth, and it can really be important going forward in their life for several reasons, as it helps them maintain bonds with others moving forward. Next slide. So next, I just want to go through the ages and stages of social emotional development. And if you have a child, it might help to kind of think of them at these different ages and kind of what you recall, or if I talk about the age that they are now, kind of think about like some things that you've seen and how it correlates. And it's important to also keep in mind that a child's age only provides a clue as to which stage of development that they're in. It does not necessarily determine what stage they are in concretely. Every child develops at their own speed, and children are not necessarily a checklist of milestones to check off. It's important to keep in mind that these skills can be learned in the stages that I mentioned or in later stages of development. Kids are constantly building up their resiliency and developing, and there is no capacity to which children can learn or how much children can grow. So go ahead with the next slide.
McKenna, are they going to put up the interpretation?
Shelby, how's that going?
I am still working on it. Hopefully I'll have it up soon.
Okay.
I'm not sure who here needs interpretation.
Maybe we could ask.
Yeah, do you want to ask that in Spanish?
¿Hay alguien que necesita la interpretación en español?
Yeah, I'm not sure that anyone here needs that, actually, Shelby. What do you think?
Yeah, if we don't need it, then we can just keep going.
Okay.
Okay, Sonia, so is Sonia okay to leave, or does she need to stay, Shelby?
I'll stay. I'd like to hear it.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. So now I'm just going to go into some stages of social emotional development from newborns to 5 years old. And I'm just going to go through the different stages. Let's see. So starting in the earliest months, it's really helpful to tune into baby's cues and pay attention to their sounds, facial expressions, and gestures. And then respond sensitively. This lets babies know that their feelings and needs are recognized and important. And this can help them really feel secure and start that attachment process to their caregivers. So for example, if you're playing with a baby and they arch their back and make a disgruntled face or sound, they might be telling you that they need a break or want to be held differently or something like that. So in the 0 to 1 phase, social emotional development kind of generally goes like this. By 6 months, your baby might recognize familiar faces. They might like to look in a mirror, smile spontaneously. They probably like to play and may react with negative emotion if play ends. Babies at this age mimic language and use babbling or coos to communicate. They can mimic facial expressions like smiles and frowns, and they cry in different ways to communicate different needs and feelings like hunger, boredom, frustration, or sleepiness. They also can make different noises for feeling happy or excited, and they will probably respond to strangers by seeking out a caregiver that they trust. And then by 11 months old, your baby responds to talking with sounds, and they show curiosity and a desire to explore how things work. They're really into learning about cause and effect. They might experience some separation anxiety as you start to leave the home or leave them with other caregivers, and they will begin to show their new personality traits that are developing. And they also begin to understand simple one-word requests or phrases. They usually love music and movement, and they can even mimic animal noises, things like that. And they really start to learn from their environment and what they see around them. And then next slide. From 1 to 2 in toddlerhood, around age 1, children become more independent while gaining new motor skills, and they will express more of their personality. They might be a little bit clingy and seek your comfort when they're scared, tired, lonely, or sad. And they might show preference for parents over certain other caregivers. They might begin to copy others and express fear or shyness or nervousness in unfamiliar situations or with unfamiliar people. And they'll be kind of wary of strangers still, but they might begin to desire to interact more with others, especially playing alongside other children. They won't understand sharing yet, and play is very important at this age to help them learn and investigate the world around them. But usually at this age, it's solitary play or parallel play where they're playing next to other children or with you. And then next, is this on this slide? Let's see. I need to make sure we're on the right side. Yeah, same slide. By age 2, they are beginning to learn how to express themselves when they're angry or when they have other big feelings, or even if they're just tired or hungry. But because they don't have the verbal skills yet to name their feelings, they're more likely to show it and react to their emotions physically. So in this stage, children show a broad range of emotions, and they might have frequent mood changes that signal that they're trying to take control of their impulses and their feelings and actions. They're trying to manipulate their environment to get what they need. And 2-year-olds are egocentric by nature, meaning they cannot yet understand the idea that other people have thoughts and feelings different than their own. So their concept of the world really does revolve around their own needs and feelings, and they think that your concept of the world does too. So they may try to copy others' words and actions. They start to really notice the things that they see, the behaviors they notice, and they try to replicate them. And many children around this stage have kind of begin to behave a little defiantly to test limits and see the effects of their actions. They like to experiment to see what will happen when they do certain things. So it's just important to remember that their experimentations are helping them learn about their environment. And if they're experimenting, then that means they feel safe to explore. And it's important to use those moments as teaching opportunities instead of necessarily punishment or discipline. Next stage, or I'm sorry, next slide, and the next stage, from 3 to 5. From ages 3 to 5, they're usually preschoolers and kindergartners, and they still can exhibit toddler-like behavior at times, but they're more receptive to being taught regulation skills. So as your 3-year-old's attention span grows and more verbal skills develop, they will be able to better follow instructions and express their own needs and thoughts. Temper tantrums do tend to peak around this age, around 3, as your child learns to deal with stressful situations or disappointment. So even though your 3-year-old might insist on independence, they'll still struggle to deal with frustration when given the opportunity to try something on their own, especially if they still need help with it. And some 3-year-olds have a hard time being separated from their caregivers still. They might begin to start understanding emotions, both their own and others. And they might be able to use simple expressions like "I'm mad," or I'm happy to let you know how they feel. Around this age, they also begin to learn how to share and take turns, but they still might not always like it and need some help with that. Preschoolers are really influenced by the things that they love, and it's really common for them to copy their favorite characters from TV or books, or copy behaviors of those around them. And kids in this stage begin to show empathy when another person is hurt or upset and may try to comfort the other person. Cognitive development in a 3-year-old isn't just about learning the alphabet or how to count, but children in this stage begin to engage in the entire learning process of absorbing and understanding information after processing it. And most 3-year-olds are like sponges and they absorb everything around them. So as adults, it's really important that we help them learn what to do with the information they're absorbing. And then around 4, your child starts to want to make the most of every opportunity to learn and play and grow. And in this stage, they show a big desire for independence and they want to do as much as possible by themselves usually. And it's normal for them to be cooperative one minute and then overly demanding the next. But overall, they're gaining better control of their emotions and they're becoming a little bit more aware of themselves and other people's feelings. So they start to experience a broader range of emotions, even like jealousy, grief, loneliness, fear. So this is really a key time to teach your child some appropriate ways to handle those big feelings. And temper tantrums are hopefully becoming less and less frequent in this stage as your child learns coping mechanisms. But major life events such as a move, a divorce, the birth of a sibling, those kinds of things can really affect your child's mood and behaviors. While trusted adults like parents and grandparents are still the primary source of your child's interactions, the opinions of friends and peers are starting to become more important, and they start to establish some real friendships, and they might even have a best friend. They're a little bit more ready to share and take turns with peers, but they still might need help with that from a trusted adult. But they are starting to get better in this stage at problem solving, and they usually can get a good handle on how to incorporate a solution that will appease everyone, or at least try to, with some help of adults. And then at age 5, many children are still straddling the not too distant passive toddlerhood and preschool years, and then the big kid phase of development that's to come. So while a 5-year-old might be able to exhibit more self-control than a toddler, at the same time, this child at this age or stage is still learning to regulate their emotions and will still be prone to meltdowns over something like a spilled glass of milk or other seemingly minor events. The world looks really different to a 5-year-old than it does to their adult caregivers. And so we might begin to assume that they understand situations more than they actually do, or due to them having increased language skills and independence since they're a big kid now, we might significantly raise our expectations for them. However, it's very important to understand that even at 5 years old, they're just now becoming more self-aware and more social. They're constantly trying to make sense of their experiences and what they've learned from those around them. And things that seem unimportant to us can feel like the end of the world to kids in all of these stages, really, because there's those cognitive skills and impulse control skills are still in the beginning phases of development. Many 5-year-olds are people pleasers who actively want to make friends and receive positive responses from adults. So positive reinforcement and praise can go a really long way. And they still might display some emotional extremes or meltdowns, but they might be able to articulate their feelings in a little bit more of an advanced way or a meaningful way. They might be able to say something like, I don't want to go to bed yet, or I don't want to go to the park tomorrow, I want to go today, or something like that. And they also naturally start to begin to feel empathy in this stage and really try to comfort others. So it's a really great time to start teaching social skills and problem solving. Next slide. That is a lot of information, and that was kind of the big, broad overview of social emotional development in those early years. And so to tie that back into mental health, early childhood mental health is, again, just basically an indication of how well the child manages stress and how functional their behavior is in response to big feelings or situational problems. So that's why understanding the stages and ages of emotional and social development is important, because it informs us about what we should expect of them It helps us compare about how well they're able to manage stress, big feelings, or social conflict. So it gives us a hint about their mental health quality and their social well-being and everything like that. It helps us understand how they see the world at different ages and how they view other people or view themselves, and if they feel safe enough to learn and explore in general. A child's mental health can change and fluctuate over time, especially dependent on their environment and other life events that can impact it, like we talked about. But I also want to mention that some mental health conditions are genetic and are present from birth, and others are developed as a result of how the individual responds to their environment and their experiences. So there's both there. But in this next little bit, this slide here, I just want to talk a little bit about how children learn in general, because it kind of helps us as adults understand how to teach them these skills. So first, they learn through show and tell. They learn a new skill or concept by observing it and being taught through demonstration, examples, and explanation of how something works. And then they learn by practicing it, and practice makes perfect. So when they're given opportunities to practice, your child becomes fluent and can use the skill or apply the concept without a prompt eventually. Maybe practice doesn't make perfect, but it makes it makes for more an ability to generalize that skill in other situations, which is the next step there. Once the child maintains the use of a skill or concept over time, they can continue to practice it in new situations or with new people, which is what we call generalization. And it's important to kind of also know that children absorb information in phases. So you might discuss something once with your child, but they might still have questions that come up later, or they might need some time to process the information and then go over it again. They might need some repetition there in that first show and tell phase. So it's important to be patient and allow for repetition as they're connecting dots, so to speak. And again, I bring up this learning process because it's important to model these social skills and emotional regulation skills, especially calm down strategies for our children, if we want them to learn these skills and apply them independently. So first they need to see us do it and then be prompted to practice, and then they can generalize that skill or calm down strategy in new situations with other people. And the best time to teach a new skill or concept is when a child is calm. When they are emotionally escalated or upset, their frontal lobe is not engaged, and so they're not even absorbing the information or planning ahead or making decisions. They're just kind of functioning on that emotion center of the brain. And so it's best to teach children new skills while they're calm so that they can practice it while they're calm. And then later on, when they are upset, they might be able to recall what they've learned with some simple modeling from an adult. And that would be what we call generalization, like we were talking about. If they can take it from doing it when they're calm to then doing it when they're upset, that means they're learning that skill. And I really like this quote that kind of describes the learning process. It's what I do for you now, I will do with you later, and then you can do it on your own. And that's kind of how the learning process goes with kids. Next slide. And to finish up, I know we're a little bit early, but I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions and whatnot. I wanted to provide some activities to help foster these social emotional skills that we discussed. And again, there will be a handout provided after the training for those of you who put your name in the chat. And in the beginning, we talked about the 4 core social emotional components, which again are being able to regulate and express emotions, build coping skills and resilience, form close interpersonal secure relationships, and feeling safe enough to explore their environment and learn. And so here are 4 things that you can do to help your child's social emotional development as far as those skills go. First, it really helps a lot to talk a lot about feelings with your child at any chance you get. This can help children learn how to label and talk about their own emotions, and then later they will learn how to regulate their responses the more you talk about what to do with those big feelings. And sometimes it also takes some modeling, so not just talking about feelings, but modeling your own and labeling your own feelings and what you're going to do in response to those feelings. It can really help them learn what to do when they feel that way, but also it helps them build that empathy piece and care for other people. So when you feel sad or when you feel a little frustrated, you can label that and then talk about what you're going to do to respond to those feelings and how you're going to calm yourself down or how you're going to problem solve. And it's important to keep in mind that our children's emotional reactions can trigger our own emotional reactions as well, which can lead us to feeling like we need to stop their emotional reaction right away, or we need to just rescue them or just fix whatever's causing them distress so we can make the crying stop, or we can just have the situation end. But it can cause us to lose our own ability to regulate our own emotions in that moment as well, which only teaches them what we don't want them to do. So if we manage our own feelings and avoid this temptation to just get them to stop expressing their feelings immediately, then it will avoid us missing opportunities to help children learn coping skills. And it will help us validate their emotional response instead of invalidating their emotional response. So even if their crying is stressful for you, it's important to maybe have some of your own regulation skills, like taking some deep breaths and then validating their feelings by rephrasing what is wrong to show them that you understand and that you hear them. But you don't have to validate any negative behaviors or inappropriate reactions to those feelings, such as throwing or hitting. So it might look something like saying, it's okay to feel mad. I know it's hard to wait, but we don't throw things when we're mad. That's not safe. What else can we do? And kind of talking them through that moment instead of just our own emotional reacting. We'll talk more about the difference between impulsively reacting or intentionally responding in a different training later on. So another tip is to give your child choices that you choose to offer them. This helps build their self-awareness, which is one of those main skills, their independence and confidence, and it helps build responsible decision-making skills as well. It also helps them feel like they're a little bit in control, which can increase cooperation. So this one's all about really joining your child by having power with them instead of power over them as far as the choices they're able to make. So for example, you can give them 2 choices for their outfit in the morning, or if they're not ready to transition activities, you can offer a choice about what they can do next or when they can be all done. You can say something like, okay, do you want to be all done in 3 minutes or 5 minutes? And then when they choose a time limit, you go set a timer. The most important part of this is following through on the negotiation that you made. And if they ask for a different option, that's not a choice, you can say that's not a choice right now, maybe later, and remind them of the choices that they do have. This is another strategy that we'll talk about in future trainings as well. And then another tip would be to use challenging behaviors as teachable moments. We mentioned this a little bit earlier, but for example, you might want to offer breaks. I am a advocate for using breaks instead of timeouts as an easy way to positively reframe something that's normally used as a punishment, because this changes it to a coping strategy that will then help them calm down and is a little bit more effective and developmentally appropriate, considering they don't have those impulse control skills yet. And taking a break is a coping skill that they later can do on their own. So if they learn to do that when they're upset early on, they can learn that they just need to go calm their body down, take some deep breaths, or counting, or they can do some lemon squeezes where they squeeze their hands together really tight, or whatever other coping strategies they develop on their own and that they prefer. Frequent positive praise for doing something right goes a long way as well. So once they're calm, you can finally have an opportunity to talk about those feelings that they had or solve the problem that they were upset about. And then the last tip is to spend quality one-on-one time together. This really maintains the attachment and strengthens the bond between you and your child, which also increases cooperation. And it's really beneficial to consistently spend time playing on their level with them, having cuddle time before bed, doing a craft together, reading to them, or singing and dancing together, things like that. And the next slide is the last slide. I just want to finish up with what you do if you have concerns about your child's social, emotional development or mental health and when to seek help. So as we said before, children develop at different paces, and during early development, a lot of parents wonder if their child's behavior is normal for their age. But I do encourage you to kind of reframe your idea of what normal is and shift your focus to just identifying your individual child's strengths, needs, and opportunities for growth. Since they do experience the world totally differently than we do as grown-ups, we have to build our own understanding that there is no right or wrong, good or bad way for our kids to be themselves. We just need to meet them where they're at and adjust as they continue to learn and grow. But if you do have questions about how to respond to your child's social emotional needs, or if you have concerns about your child's development or behavior, including their emotions and their responses to stress, you can ask your child's physician, your child's teacher or home visitor, or you can discuss concerns with a mental health consultant like myself. Head Start recognizes the importance of children's mental health and emotional well-being. And so staff works closely together with the help of mental health consultants and with parents to support families in this area. And we can all work together to build your skills, build your children's skills, and put the puzzle pieces together in order to help their functioning and help their well-being develop. Oh, I lied. There's one more slide. Go ahead with the next one. I just wanted to finish off by saying that if we focus on enhancing children's strengths and choosing to view challenges as learning opportunities, we will raise resilient kids who are able to persevere and recover from stressful challenges as they are confronted with them. And again, there's no limit or capacity to how much a child can learn or develop. And children are always wondering and assessing, is there space for me? Is there a place for me? And is there grace for me? So this means children are always looking to us for security, acceptance, and validation, and forgiveness, all of which impact their mental health and well-being. And on the next slide, I just want to thank you for listening and open up the floor for any questions before you go. Or if you have any topics that you'd like to learn about in future trainings, you can also throw those out there. I saw a comment in the chat earlier, wishing your 11-month-old would sleep through the night. That's a tricky one. Does anyone have any questions?